Navigating an SAP transformation? We get it. By day, we work hands-on with people like you across the globe. By night, we share what actually works. Welcome to Transformation Every Day with Alexander Greb and Johannes Languth, where your complex transformation becomes clear, actionable, and achievable.
Welcome everybody. My name is Alexander Greb and you're listening to Transformation Every Day, expert insights and stories on SAP and beyond. After a 3-month break, welcome to Season 2. We are back with even more expert insights, real stories and honest perspectives on SAP and beyond. And before we start, first a big thank you for all the feedback, the support and for making Season 1 what it was, including winning the Best SAP Podcast Award and becoming a top 20 Spotify tech podcast. And I think this episode is the perfect way to kick things off, because for Season 2 launch, I'm joined by Rouven Morato, currently in transition and formerly President and Executive CRO for SAP Signavio, LeanIX, WalkMe, and RISEwithSAP. Rouven is someone who has seen transformation from the inside out. He started in finance, became the youngest CFO at SAP, moved into data and analytics leadership, and ultimately helped to shape SAP's entire business transformation portfolio. Few people have that kind of end-to-end perspective on how companies actually change. That's exactly what makes this conversation so valuable. We talk about why most transformations don't fail because of technology, but because the foundations are not in place, why process, systems, data, and people are not separate discussions, but one connected system, and why transformation is not a project you execute once, but a capability you have to build and train over time. And you'll also hear a lot of very interesting storytelling about how these things actually came together inside SAP. From the inside, from the people who were shaping it. And of course, we talk about AI. Not the hype, not the headlines, but what it really means for companies, where it will actually create value, why so many organizations will struggle, and what separates those who will move fast from those who will get left behind. So, if you care about transformation, about SAP, about where enterprise technology is heading, you will want to listen to this. And I'm happy to welcome Rouven Morato to Transformation Every Day.
Not really, like I played with my parents a little bit, but like the real passion only started when I actually took a break at SAP and got back to golf. So I took a 6-month sabbatical when my third son was born. That's about 12 years ago now. And that's where I restarted playing golf. And that's where the true passion then started to really intensify it a little bit more.
Yeah, with a certain age, you get more the importance and the demand for these kinds of, let's say, balancing, leveling out activities. Yeah,
100%. And golf is addictive to people who are very how should I say, motivated and want to achieve something, because you have a good strike and then you have 3 bad ones, but you know that you had a good one, so you want to have the good one again, and then you try again and you try again, but it always pushes you back. So golf is punishes very much in detail. So it's an interesting, also psychological sport, I must say.
Yeah, and the topic, of course, it's like a language you can talk all over the world. You want to meet people, you want to get into conversation, go golfing.
Indeed, and you can play it until like right? So I'm turning 50 now, but I can still play it for another maybe 25, 30 years, which is unlike many other sports, which you can't play that long.
Definitely. And we're talking about a serious career today, which is great to have you on board. Rouven Morato, definitely a veteran of the SAP and transformation world. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Before we start, I think there are not so many things to tell about you and about the last years you spent at SAP and what you've achieved without people knowing them. But how would you, in 2 or 3 sentences, put together what you were focusing on in the last years?
Well, I would say, the header probably is transformation, like the same as this podcast. My career was going through very different areas in the company. So I was in finance, I was in IT, I was in operations, I was on the sales side, on the go-to-market side. And I always tried to get a holistic understanding of things. How do things really work in a company? I wanted to go through SAP and understand how it works there. And once I learned that, I we then felt I can also use that to help our customers, because many things that I came across, I knew many of our customers are coming across. So if you will, I turned it around then and applied what I learned internally towards helping our customers on their own journey.
Which is almost, I may call it like old school, yeah, because that's what we, of course, in the last years more and more hear from customers, because our industry has become quite crowded with people who talk about salvation without having felt the pain. With you, it's much different, and I want to go into the first of these kind of stages of your, let's say, personal transformation experience, which was working in this CFO space. What was at that time back then, let's say, the biggest challenges that you encompassed and the biggest topics that formed already at that early stage your attitude towards transformation?
Well, first of all, I think I'm a finance guy from profession. So I did a banking apprenticeship in Germany. I studied banking and international finance and business administration. I started my career in finance. So it kind of was becoming a CFO was a journey going through different stages in finance. And being a CFO, I was a CFO of a market unit, which means SAP is structured as the corporate entity, and then you have market units in each country that are the distribution arms for our software. So you are the head of finance within a sales organization. That means the CFO has a lot interaction directly with customers, negotiating deals, negotiating contracts, payment terms, and whatsoever. But you also have the internal responsibility for the operations, for contracting, for revenue recognition, for accounting, for planning, for budgeting, and all the typical CFO tasks. So it was a nice blend for me at the time to, first of all, and that was the reason why I went into a CFO role, I wanted to understand how we interact with customers. I wanted to see how we sell software. What does it mean to close a software contract? In my prior roles, I was in internal finance departments like treasury, like the M&A department, where you didn't have any exposure towards that. So I wanted to learn that. I wanted to gain that. And it was a great blend between that external exposure, getting contact with customers, knowing how deals work, knowing how negotiations work, how contracts are structured. But then at the same time, also having the responsibility to drive efficiency, to make sure that we can send out the contracts towards quarter end in time and have operations under control and being able to really help to drive that forward. So I think that was the interesting part in the CFO role. And I really must say that was a very exciting role. I guess the youngest CFO at the time, I was, I think, 32. So it was an early stage career for me, but it was a very important role for me to have. And I learned a ton there in that 2.5, 3 years that I did that role. So it was a really, I would say, one of the things that I remember, and also was probably one of the things that then took me to the next steps, if you will, in my career, because the things I learned there helped me then to understand the company much better at the time.
Hi there. Quick break for a short message before we go right back to the episode. Enjoying the insights and stories on transformation every day? Want to make sure you never miss an episode packed with practical tips and best practices from the SAP world, featuring conversations with some of the most interesting people in the SAP universe? Then hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform, whether it is Apple, Spotify, or any other you use. And if our podcast brings you value, we would be incredibly grateful if you could leave us a 5-star review and share it with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us. Thanks so much, and happy listening.
We closed the season 1 of our podcast with Christian Straub talking about similar things. Yeah, like, for example, how the CFO especially in the last years, has become more and more the focus point for transformation conversations. Yeah. How did you perceive these kinds of, let's say, new challenges and new topics that CFOs have to cover? And do you think that our industry is approaching the CFOs of today the right way?
So first of all, when I became the CFO for SAP Germany and also at that time DACH, so the regional CFO, we were in the middle of, I would say, a large-scale transformation as SAP overall, because it was the time when SAP did the first big acquisition. So you remember 15 years ago, SAP and Oracle were competing head-to-head. Oracle went the acquisition spree. SAP always said, oh, we do this organically. And then at some point, SAP also started to acquire business objects, was the first one, then SuccessFactors, Ariba, Concur, and the like. So when I came into the CFO role, we were digesting the first large-scale acquisitions that SAP did. And that means a lot in the field, in the market units, when you think about contract consolidation, bringing the new entities in, bringing them on the price list, starting to sell them, building out the go-to-market. And on top came then that we acquired the first cloud company. So the SaaS topic first time came into SAP with SuccessFactors, Ariba, and the likes. And so you had that also cultural change, because these new SaaS companies were coming into SAP, and I was the CFO of SAP Germany, right? So the home base of SAP, where the mentality was SAP is the dominant force, and what we have done for the last 30 was great. And now these little companies that we acquired came in and were claiming that they know how the cloud works and that they know how to do the business better than SAP, right? So there was a bit of that conflict in culture. And as a CFO, you obviously have the responsibility for the numbers, and you are responsible for the budgets and for making sure that the things are aligned. So making sure that the two worlds don't collide, and that sales now gets harmonized and go-to-market processes get harmonized, and that this is reflected in budgets, in comp plans, and the likes. That all comes together in that role. And so it was a very interesting phase for SAP. And for me as the CFO, I could feel it. I mean, in the transformation projects that we had, the PMI projects, or the post-merger integration projects, they were all driven partially or mainly out of finance, and I would say what you'd probably call operations, so IT and processes, and all these things, because it was about bringing onboarding these companies, bringing them into SAP, and making sure they understand how to deal with SAP language, SAP customers, SAP contracts, and so on. So at that time, I mean, it was a very important milestone for SAP to take this. And I felt it took quite a bit, especially culturally, to really bring it together. I mean, we in the market, we said we are a cloud company by declaration, I would say.
Exactly.
And that's by really living it like a cloud company, because the things like adoption, like customer satisfaction. Yes, of course, we did that at the time. It was 2013, 2014, 2015 maybe, but not the same like a native SaaS company would do that. So I do think that the CFO played a critical role in that, also in the field market units, because finance is where things are coming together, where the bookings are coming together, where the numbers are coming together, and where you set the foundation for the steering of the organization with the budgets, with the comp plans, and so on. And so I could see that the CFO plays an important role. And also, honestly, I mean, on our customer side, the main contact of SAP, of course, has always been and probably will always be the CIO. But the CFO always was second. Like, you were always like the second most important stakeholder at our customers was the CFO, because they own the budgets, they steer the company. And if you want to drive transformation, if you want to drive change, it doesn't work without having the backing of the CFO, of the guy who holds the money, right, in the end. So I think, like you said, the CFO plays an important role. And in my role at that time, I was in the middle of it, and I could see it, I could sense it as well.
The difference that is quite often heard is, for example, when you talk to a CIO, when you approach with a CIO. CIOs, unfortunately, still in many cases are like a cost center. Yeah, so they are measured about delivering a certain defined service for the lowest possible budget. Yeah, and as such, of course, a CIO is more pressed into the operations and maintenance edge than really into the innovation edge. And as far as many of our customers tell us, so the CFO now is stepping more and more up, experience this kind of innovation stimulus for themselves and became one of the driving forces in there. Do you think that this kind of what you said, like CIO is and probably will be for a considerable amount of time the main approach partner, why the CIO may have become the comfort zone for us in the SAP ecosystem, the CFO may become more and more the one you can talk to when you really want to make a change?
Yeah, I do think there is some truth to that, because when we talk about transformation, we often talk about you need the buy-in from the business. And I think the CFO sometimes is the business when you talk about finance processes, when you talk about, I don't know, accounts receivables, accounts payable, whatsoever in the core ERP system, FICO, those kind of things. There, he or she is the business. But at the same time, he or she also has the corporate hat on, right? Which is, they hold the money for the budget for the big transformation project. If it also includes supply chain or production or whatsoever, logistics. So I think, if you will, the CFO has a dual role in the company, right? It's kind of still corporate, like the CIO, who then does the implementation. The CFO does the budget or provides the budget. That's where he wears his corporate hat. But at the same time, he has a much stronger business acumen, as most CIOs have it, because the CIOs sometimes, like you said, they have to keep the lights on the IT side. They should drive innovation, but they still are on the technical side. The CIO hardly in a business really is a business person, whereas the CFO, and I mean, we had great examples at SAP, like Luka Mucic, right? I mean, he was a business CFO for sure, right? Driving true transformation in the company. Like if a software company wanted to sell to Luka, they didn't sell to the corporate guy. They always sold to the business guy. So, and I think that also is true for many CFOs out there. But just like the CIOs, sometimes you find CIOs who are very forward-leaning, who are very innovative, very like business-centric. The same applies to CFOs. You sometimes have them, but sometimes you still come across the CFOs who care about the accounting and the books, and that's it, right? And they don't really want to drive transformation. So it depends a little bit on the personality, but in general, I do think the CFOs are more likely to drive and help push transformation than a CIO might be. The CIO, you definitely need him, and they play a vital role in making it real, in making it happen, because any transformation today touches the CIO kind of playbook and their domain, because everything is captured in software and kind of technology. And therefore, you need the CIOs, but the CFO is more likely to really help to push it on the business side than the CIO.
When you talk about that, we are moving more from the IT to the business part. In a certain way, you did the opposite, because from being a CFO, you step more into a more, let's say, data-driven, more technical world, becoming the chief data officer. The first question, of course, there is was that back then a natural move for you? Did you really have to stretch far for that? Or did it come natural and you just saw it as, let's say, a different perspective on the same thing? And the second question is, how really did your, let's say, practical work as a CFO, when you worked with actual real life data, with numbers and so on, with coping with the job of a chief data officer?
Yeah, I'll answer the second question first, if that's okay, because the reason I got the job was because I was always complaining as a CFO about our reporting capabilities, because we were in this transformation of on-prem to cloud, of integrating acquisitions. When I was a CFO, I didn't feel that we were innovative enough and that we were kind of leading edge in the way we were steering the company with the ability on our reporting, on our data, right? When I wanted to understand, okay, what's the adoption of the software? I didn't get the numbers as a CFO, right? So I could feel the gap that we had in our own internal capabilities to drive our own transformation. And I was loudly complaining about it. And then maybe as a side remark, I took a sabbatical for 6 months when I left the CFO role. And then at the time, Luka and Werner Brand, our former group CFO, was still in role. And Luka was the global field CFO. And he then called me while I was on my sabbatical. And he said, "Hey, Rouven, I remember you were always complaining about our reporting capabilities. Here is your opportunity to fix it. We have decided at the company to bring all analytics and like reporting capabilities together in one function to ensure that we harmonize the data, that we bring all the data accessibly on one platform, and by that can steer end to end, because SAP was organized in different silos, if you will. So marketing had their data, finance had their data, sales had their data, and the analytics on top. And everybody was doing their own thing. And then when you were combining it at the top, nothing matched because they all had different semantics, different meanings, different definitions. And so at the top, nothing really matched anymore, exaggerating a little bit, but like it was very high effort to get it matching at the top. And that was why the company then decided to take it. So the reason why I got the job was that I was complaining about it. So if you will, that was the real life problem that I was facing. And that was why I then went into the space. And that's why it also kind of came naturally for me, because throughout my career, I always try to close gaps of understanding how the company works, right? So I kind of then, finance was fine. I did different roles in finance. I had the field, so sales covered with my CFO role because I was a very business-leaning CFO. I was a lot with customers, negotiating, driving deals, sponsoring customers, and so on. So I felt like I know sales. What I didn't know yet was like product, tech, like data, the data space. Like I felt like I don't really understand that yet. So that was a great opportunity for me to close this gap, because I knew that if I take the role of now bringing all analytics in the company together, to bring it all onto one joint data platform, to introduce a joint analytics model on top, that I would be exposed to a lot of tech, right? Like data management, database, how do you bring it all together, APIs, connecting the stuff and semantic layers and so on. So for me, it was a logical next step to complement my profile and have a stronger exposure also on the tech side, without necessarily going into product development or engineering directly. Similar, like I went not directly into sales, but I kind of did it within finance. So I had my exposure within my CFO role. I was in the field doing field work in my finance role. And similar, it was here in my analytics role. I then was doing a lot of tech work without really being on the product and development side. So, but to complement my profile, it was a perfect move at the time.
But it's coming quite natural, of course, when you work at a software selling company. You're working in a business role at that company. You're using your own software. And as such, I remembered quite well that I also took like you or Luca and so on, those people, taking them and bringing them to customers to tell about how SAP is actually using their own stuff. Of course, in that, the question arises, does then a company like SAP or like in any software-related product-based industry, are they always the best, in your opinion, to use their own tools?
So let's put it that way. I mean, there is the famous shoemaker example, right? In German, you say the shoemaker oftentimes doesn't have the nicest shoes, or the doctor is the worst patient, right? So like
exactly.
I would say SAP, when I started at SAP in 2005, we were not great at that at all. So like we were running on ECC 4.6, and those of you who know SAP, we were on this until I would say ish or so, where many other customers already had moved on way beyond that state. So we were lagging behind. Like you said before, we were treated like more a cost center and not like trying to be leading edge. That changed significantly while I was in finance. I could sense it, like where SAP runs SAP became a brand, right? So where we wanted to show our customers how we use our software. So once I became a CFO, we were doing this quite a lot, right? We were showing them how we do collections, how we use our ERP system. At that time, the things around machine learning for the first time were kind of hitting the ground. So we were experimenting with that and playing around. Mobile apps, we showed them how we run reporting on that and so on. So I think it was a transition there. I think today, by now, we are pretty far advanced as SAP, as a software company, in how we use our stuff. I mean, with AI, obviously, the next wave has just arrived, where SAP is doing a lot in that space to help our employees to use that. So I think over the time, it changed significantly. And we were, I mean, probably know about the digital boardroom, for example, right, which was a pretty famous thing that SAP launched when we brought out SAC. Actually, this was invented by my team within SAP, because at the time our chairman Hasso Plattner was not happy with going through paper folders in their supervisory board meeting. Mm-hmm. And he said, guys, I gave you HANA, I gave you real-time access to your data. Why are we still going through folders in our board meetings? Why are we not looking at a giant screen, touch screen, and flipping through numbers? So at that time, Helen Arnold, who was our CIO, and Luka Murcic, the CFO, came to me. I was then leading enterprise analytics, as we called it. And they came to me and said, Rouven, we have to fix this internally. This was not for customers. It was meant to improve the way we steer the company and how we interact with data. Of course, we had in mind that once we do it, we can also productize it. And that was exactly what happened. Because out of the digital boardroom, out of that concept of having that big giant screen and accessible data in real time in the meeting, where you can then, I want to see how this looks in China. Can we check the same for North America? I want to look at by this dimension and by that. And you could drill in and you could filter and you could slice and dice the data in whatever manner. That was very powerful at the time, right? It was 2016-ish when we launched it at Sapphire, I think. So we were in the middle of that and we were driving that new innovation. And obviously that was one of the things, and actually we still show it today, where our finance department shows our customers how we use things like the digital boardroom to run the company. So there the SAP runs SAP got kind of into the Champions League, if you will, because then this was front and center in every customer visit in Walldorf. We were in the big room, literally in the supervisory board room where the supervisory board meetings take place, at that big giant touchable screen. And I was doing a lot of the demos. Luca was doing the demos to give like software a bit of more experience layer, right? Like make it touchable, what does HANA do for you? Like, it was always the big question. What's the benefit of HANA? There you had a great showcase where you could prove it, show it. And it was obviously very impressive to have somebody swipe around on a touchable screen and throw numbers here and there. So it was also a nice experience then that we could transport. So I think that's where you could then really touch and see the SAP runs SAP in a very modern and very innovative way. And we were proud that we were actually part of that with my team at the time, that we were the inventors of the digital boardroom, which then was later on productized into SAC. So what people today know as SAP Analytics Cloud was kind of born at that time. We then collaborated deeply with Gerrit Katzmeier at the time, who was leading analytics, and Stefan Sick before him, to make a product out of this. And then a reporting and analytics product was launched later out of that.
I remember very well one day when back then I was bringing also a customer of mine to the digital boardroom. And like you said, we were in the big actual SAP boardroom in WDF01. Luca was hosting the session and so on. And the customer, he asked a very interesting question. He says like, okay, this is absolutely stunning and I see the vision, but is the technology actually the topic which is for me the big step, or is it the preparation to be able to make the technology run and so on? And the answer was quite clear that, okay, the one thing is the tool. The tool is implementable. That's no problem. Yeah. But the real challenge, of course, is, and now we are back at the point in the data, that you actually have to give systems like these quality information they can work with. Do you see, and we remember very well these kinds of data discussions like, we have to really touch that and we have to really do something. But that was also the one thing that was never really approached, because it was really difficult back then to find a business case and the fundings and so on. So many customers, they're sitting still on these kind of unresolved questions. Do you think that technology and the vision, actually what you can do with that, then moves the needle so much that actually the big steps are done on client side to bring the things together which are relevant for these kinds of technological jumps?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think we come across this, like in every technology change, you come across the same problem. And the problem is, yes, technology theoretically can do a lot of things, but if the underlying work has not been done, it's very difficult to really get the benefits out of it. I mean, we are seeing it again, right now with AI.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then I'm sure we'll get to that later. But
Absolutely.
at that time, it was exactly the same problem. It was the emergence of SaaS, right? And SaaS promised to solve a lot of the problems of usability, experience, and so on. But again, if you build something on top of a very weak or messy base, the construct will hardly hold. And the same holds true here. To your point, 100%, if your data was messy, the greatest UI, the greatest digital boardroom or whatsoever, like it wouldn't work, because like you would look at rubbish data and it doesn't matter if you can then touch it and filter and slice it. The meaning of data is that it's accurate and that it shows the truth of your current situation, because you want to make decisions on that. And if the data is wrong, the layer which represents it doesn't matter at all. So technology can always only be an enabler. And actually, we'll get to that as well in my next career step, because like when we talk about transformation and when we talk about running and operating a company, it's never only about technology. It cannot be about technology only. Technology is one important aspect, and without technology, you will have a hard time making an efficient organization work. But it's certainly not the only one, right? And we later then identified that it's also not only the data. Yes, the data is yet another important ingredient. And that's actually why later on, so I was leading enterprise analytics first, and then later on, we added the data management aspect to it, because it was a combination. It was a joint thing to have reporting and analytics and the data layer underneath, and that needs to be in sync, right? And data management is kind of an important aspect, and the work to make data work, right? To make data clean and make data accessible and make data referenceable, make data meaningful in the end, right? So, but data again is also only one aspect, right? And there are further aspects like the people, right, or the processes, right? And like it's always a combination of all of these aspects to make the things work. In the digital boardroom, and I think it's a great visualization of the problem, because if either one of these elements breaks, if the people don't understand where's the data coming from, what do I do with the data, how do I steer the company, if the processes that lead to the data are broken, right? If data management processes are broken, you never will get to the right data. And then if you have not the right data, don't have you can have whatever technology you want, it won't result in great results. So I think it's always the combination of it, and the same held true at that time for the digital boardroom. So the question of your customers, 100% correct at that time as well. And it's super valid nowadays when we talk about AI. It's exactly the same problem, right? If you build AI on top of a bad base, you will struggle to make it work.
With you being a part of that SAP transformation, SAP, like you said, at that time, it went from not really using the latest cutting edge technology to, and this is a jump over several layers of technology and several levels of technology, to using something as cutting edge as the digital boardrooms. What did you learn from these activities of actually having to clean out the basement for your career, for other customers? What are the major learnings and the major points where you said like, okay, I have to bring my organization with me? Those were, let's say, the angles that actually work.
Yeah, I think the first recognition is it's damn hard work. It's there's hardly, like, people sometimes pretend there is that magic wand that then makes everything dissolve and make it easy and so on. There are, of course, technologies that help you to make things easier, no doubt. And AI certainly these days is one that makes things easier. But still, in the end, there is hard work to be done to clean things up. I think that's the first one. When I reflect on that time, SAP, so I was the chief analytics or data, I don't remember exactly the timing, but I think it was the chief analytics officer at that time. Data came later, where we went through the S4 migration ourselves internally, right? So where we upgraded to a very early version, it was 2016, 17-ish. So the very early days of S4. I think it was even called SFin at that time or something, but doesn't matter. But like
the simple finance.
Simple finance, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And SAP wanted to be and actually we're the second customer or second company that went live on that at the time. Because we wanted to be leading edge, we wanted to be early on. But then we had big discussions on how do we do this, because we had a very customized, heavily customized system. And we knew we have the business model change from a heavy on-prem big contracts to a more nimble and smaller and more volume-based SaaS model coming, right? So we knew that our monolithic ERP approach that we had in the past was hard to sustain into the future, and that we needed to also, like we tell our customers today, right? You have to be careful of having that monolithic ERP core that will then hold you back in driving new business models. And as we knew that things will become more like smaller, more individual, you need to be more agile in a way in your core system. We were thinking, how do we do this, right? And I still remember we were sitting. Thomas Saueressig was CIO at the time. Christian Klein was COO at the time, and Benjamin Blau, who is today the CIO, was Chief Process Officer at the time and the Chief Analytics Officer. So we were discussing how do we do this, and there was like today there were different ways, right? Like greenfield, brownfield. So how do you go? I was a strong proponent of greenfield at the time because I was leading analytics, and I knew that our data approach would be better off if we started from scratch, if we really redesign our data model and we can reapply kind of new modern concepts of how we structure our system so that reporting and like the data access becomes easier. But of course, I can also understand it would have meant at that time, because we were in the very early days, it would have meant that we freeze innovation for many other areas like sales in the CRM and other systems for quite a long time. I don't really remember exactly how long, but it was significant. And so we said, we cannot hold the rest of the business while we renovate the core for so long. We have to do this in parallel. And so we decided for brownfield. But then we clearly committed to a second phase where we said, but then we have to redo our data model in a second phase, and we have to relook at innovation, our processes, and redo the things in the second phase. And so we kind of settled on that compromise. And I think looking back, it probably was right, or was like a risk-balanced approach, if you will. And obviously today things have progressed significantly when I think about the integrated toolchain and things like that make it much faster. So we are talking about 9 years ago, right? So like things have progressed, but at that time this was how we approached it, and it was like a discussion and an evaluation, if you will, about the risks and opportunities that we needed. And for me, looking back, it was the right thing to do. But I think many customers go through such a conversation also these days, probably with different implications, if you will, but on different timelines. But in essence, it's always the question of how do you do it in the end, right? Because I do think, I personally don't believe in, just leave your ERP behind and leave it as your legacy system and innovate around it. Coming back to the point, if you have a very old legacy, unstable, very customized core, like your base, then building things around will probably not fly over time. You will always run against the walls with that, in my personal opinion. And that's why I do think that SAP did well in going early into S4, and the way we did it was a kind of a risk-aware approach, I would say.
I fully agree with that, what you say, because we see it like in waves, this kind of discussion about where should innovation happen. Is it thing of the core, or is it thing in the edges? And of course, it's quite often the more easy way to, let's say, pick a part of the edges, do something fancy there, something colorful there. Let's celebrate that on LinkedIn and so on. And suddenly you think you are in the part of in the game of the big innovators. But of course, it turns out in every wave like this, that core innovation should always be not left behind, but let's say in a comparable level of moving forward. And the second part that you said that was quite interesting to me was the part with let's call it brownfield plus, because you had the same discussion like so many customers of ours have, like okay, let's innovate, but of course, let's stay on the safe side too. And what happens there is so often that you do that kind of brownfield. You take all the legacy systems with you, and then that second phase that you mentioned, it just left out.
It happens.
And they go live and nothing really happens, and you really have to go very deep into the system to recognize at which system you're running. Is it ECC or is it already S4HANA or something like this? So what you touch with that is based on, we talked about in our conversation privately, the 4 dimension of business transformation with people, process, data, and systems, that you were heavily, in that case, moved into the part of processes and people, which of course was, let's say, a prelude to your next step with BTM. You can call it business transformation management. There's this kind of nickname for it, which has become toolchain. Many people use that. What was the thing that for you, or when was the moment for you given that you said like, hey, there's a really huge opportunity lying in that kind of area to bring these things together?
Yeah, I mean, like looking back, it feels like, oh yeah, that was a big master plan behind. But obviously it wasn't. Things have developed over time. When I was in that analytics and data role, of course, we talked a lot about like the principles behind, and we talked a lot about the systems, the data, the people, the processes, and we knew it was all connected. We didn't have the clarity like we have it today. But I mean, the good thing was that Christian, as the COO, already had that mindset of internally we did it this way. And when he became the CEO, actually, he asked me to join as his chief of staff, right hand of type of person. And when he became the sole CEO, he wanted to kind of update the strategy for the company, right? When you become a CEO, you want to bring out a new strategy. And so he asked me to run this strategy project. And one of the things that we evaluated during this strategy project was, what are new things that we need to do, right? What are new areas where we need to go into? Next to, yes, ERP is our core and the business suite around it is our strength, and bringing all of it that to market with AI and all of that. That was the business strategy. But the part of what do we need to go into newly, that was an interesting one, because we then talked to many analysts, partners, customers, and so on. And the feedback was very clear. It was like, okay, we get your vision. We get where you're heading with your suite and like with your move to RISE and everything. And RISE wasn't announced yet at that time, but like the cloud ERP thing, and we get that. But like the way there is hard for us, right? We are stuck in a very heavily customized environment. And yes, we get the point of we need to simplify, we need to upgrade, we need to go to S4. We get all of that. But like, help us to get there. You know it best. Like, you are SAP. You should know how our systems work, what our processes are. Like, how do I get the data over all of this? You should help us on that journey. And so the decision at that time was, okay, that's an area we need to invest in. We need to go into. So I created the business case for the process dimension of that, because we felt as SAP, we should know about the processes, how they run with our customers. We knew about AI, that this is coming at some point. So having the data around your processes felt like something SAP should own, right? And we should have that. And that was then the business case that we created at the time, where we went then into the space and acquired Signavio pretty quickly and kind of put the foot on the ground on the process domain and said, this is where we need to play, where we want to be. This then obviously expanded, because we saw, while we were able to now help our customers on the process dimension, this wasn't enough, right? Customers then said, okay, but I need to understand, I now see my processes, which systems are they living in? So like the adjacency to architecture became very apparent. And actually we already had a relationship to LeanIX. There was a partnering already going even before we acquired Signavio. LeanIX and Signavio were partnering already. So like there was a logical next step to then move into the enterprise architecture space, because it was an adjacent discipline of transformation, if you will, right? And then we acquired LeanIX, and we added like that application notion, like the system dimension to transformation. So if you want to drive transformation, you need to understand your processes, but you equally need to understand your system landscape. So transparency, planability of your system landscape becomes equally important as to your processes. And then we added the other components, which were then the people dimension, around driving transformation on the people side, which means you need to help people to adopt the software, to understand what is changing, to understand what processes have changed, to understand what has changed in the UI, in the landscape, where then WalkMe came in, which helps then end users to understand the changes and navigates the end user in the best possible way. And the data component today is covered with a partner, with Synity, which helps then on the data transformation aspect. And like you said, we have branded this term of the integrated toolchain. I would not actually say it's a nickname for BTM. Is more than the toolchain. The toolchain is one way to apply the components that BTM has into a certain context, which is an S4 transformation. But obviously, transformation is more than S4 or RISE, right? You can use process management, architectural transformation for introducing your next AI, which has nothing to do with an S4 migration, where you wouldn't call it the toolchain, where you would apply the capabilities of the BTM portfolio in a very different transformative context in a way. Integrated toolchain is the way we apply BTM to a RISE on S4 transformation overall.
Absolutely. And which is a good thing, in my opinion, is that it actually gives guardrails and guidelines. I experienced it in the last years quite often that we probably, and I discuss about this a lot at the moment, that we may, let's say, segment our customers probably in the wrong way, because we just go like for size on the one hand and for industry on the other. And basically that's it. Yeah. But we should also cover, of course, a third dimension, which is capability, like the capability to be able to take innovation, to take technology and move forward and actually do this. There are organizations which are better and there are organizations that are not so good at it, who need more help. BTM, the toolchain and all these elements actually help with that, to take this kind of trap value gap that exists, and bring them closer together, and as such, of course, make innovation much more easier. Are there any stories you can tell from interact with customers where you say like, hey, that's actually where it really moves the needle for them? And these are my favorite cases where BTM helped actually companies to get to the next steps of innovation.
There are plenty. I mean, obviously, the portfolio that we assembled then also more strongly integrated over time. The more it integrated, the more customers went away from, I have a great process mining case, which brought me 5 million in driving efficiencies around accounts receivables, towards introducing the BTM portfolio as, as the operating layer in the company, right? Nestle is a great example. They were on stage in The Hague at our transformation event, where they have now built all of their business processes, I think more than 2 million process steps, into Signavio. So they know exactly how the processes in their company are working. They also use process mining for it to get the data behind, but then also the modeling concepts. They have LeanIX for their entire architecture, and they have mapped the two. They have connected the two, so they can go from any process to see which systems are living this, or where are these processes running, and vice versa. If they want to sunset a system, they know exactly like which processes are affected, which process owners they need to talk to. And they are one of the biggest customers of WalkMe, one of the biggest users of WalkMe in driving like the digital adoption. And connecting all of it brings them into a stage where they can apply any transformation extremely quickly, because they know exactly which processes, which systems, and how to drive adoption of all of it. Because in the end, until really agents are doing all of the work and no human interaction is happening, until that point, the people still need to know this. People still need to be kind of in the loop, right? So, and that's where a lot of the transformations still are breaking, right? Even if you have the right tech, the right processes, if you don't take the people along, that's oftentimes still a breakage point. So having the ability to bring all of it together allows you to adopt innovation, technology-driven innovation, in a very fast and very effective way throughout your entire organization. And that is a big game changer. And we strongly believe that transformation is not a project, right? It's a capability, right? It's something that you need to train, where you need to have the right ability in place, to do it over and over again, because it does never end, right? So you do something once, it's like an S4 transformation, that might be a project, but you need to establish the capability to drive transformation, drive innovation over and over again. And that's where you then need to manifest it also in applications. You need to manifest your processes in your process repository, your applications in your architecture repository, your adoption in the way your people are using the software, right? So you need to have because then you pull it out and you can use it for the next and for the next and for the next transformation. And AI is a great example where we see customers who have the things in place to drive the transformation, and who have the capability to manage the processes, systems, data, and the people aspects. They are much more successful in adopting AI, in making AI really valuable for them, in really understanding where AI can help them the most, right? And that's a huge game changer these days. And customers who have invested over the last years in building that capability now get the benefit out of that because they are so much faster in all of that.
I have to jump on that thought because I think it extremely thrilling. Because if transformation is a muscle, how is an organization able to train that? Because so many of our clients that we have throughout the SAP universe, we find that kind of, let's say, decades development of silos, because quite natural. Software used to be developed in silos. It used to be architected in silos, and so the customer also consumed them in silos. And we have to break this up, become these kind of process-based end-to-end organizations with the transformation capability as the major muscle who brings that organization forward. Where do you see the kind of biggest bottlenecks in this development? So how to train this muscle, and what would you tell company leaders who say that's exactly what we have to become better?
Well, I think training the muscle, first of all, you need to acknowledge that it needs to be in a capability, right? So I think treating a RISE transformation as a project is a bad signal towards acknowledging that transformation needs to be a capability. I think so. So first of all, recognizing the need for this. So understanding that there is no magic wand out there that will magically make things great, right? It doesn't work. Like acknowledging that your fundament, your operating model of the company, so the way how you operate with your processes, with the system, with your data, with your people, that's what I call the operating model. Recognizing that that you need to have this under control, that you need to have visibility and the capability to change and influence this on an ongoing basis. Acknowledging and knowing that, I think, is the very first point. And then leveraging a large-scale transformation, like, for example, RISE, to do this, to apply this, to say, okay, we're not going to treat RISE as a technical upgrade, because then I only touch the system layer. I'm going to use RISE to rethink my processes, to redo my data, to check my data, to drive data quality up, to rethink my data model, and I will have my people in the loop from day one, the business and IT. I drive this as a business-driven project and not as an IT project. So that's where you can then train that muscle in a real-life example, where then you anyway, if you do it right, you anyway produce a lot of the output that you need for the future anyway, like your processes. So I redo, I rethink, I understand, I analyze my processes. That creates a process repository. That creates a lot of data around your efficiency in processes, around your output in processes. Great. That's a good starting point. Capture this in a system like Signavio. So because then you start a practice around this, you get the business engaged, you see the business starts to see, oh, that's the output of my processes. Oh, why is that? They dig deeper and they use the tool more frequently, and that starts to build a practice around it. Same on the architecture side. You're not looking only at RISE. You're not look only at your S4 system. You know that better than I do. You look at hundreds of systems that are connected. Create the repository of all of it, because afterwards, the next transformation might be on your sales systems. Oh, you now already have the 20 sales systems that are connected to your ERP system. Great starting point. You know exactly how your landscape looks like. Same with data, catalog it, get it into shape, get it into form, and get your people engaged and get them along the way. So that means like practicing that muscle. And once you have that, the next project will be easier. The next transformation you're doing, you already start from a much better starting point than you started your last one. And that's a continuous cycle. The more you do it and the more people see value in it, the better it becomes, because people are using it, and using it means you produce new data, and that means next time it will be better. And that's that upward loop that you want to start. And that's what it means in the end of the day to create a capability as opposed to a project. Because in a project, what would happen? Things would end up in a PowerPoint. The PowerPoint would be outdated half a year later. Nobody would ever look at it again because a new project starts. They would recreate everything from scratch again because you never had that central discipline anywhere. So that's why we strongly believe in that notion, and even more so in the age of AI, where velocity and agility becomes so much more important. So if you don't have those things, that knowledge base with you, it will be very hard to really make that work in an efficient way.
You said a very relevant point with the next time it's going to get easier, because the first time you approach this and when you recognize this need for, we have to get some muscles running here, is always the most difficult one. So where do you see the perfect starting point for this transformation journey? Process, architecture, data, or adoption? Is there one, or is there basically no really for it? Doesn't matter.
For me, it doesn't really matter. It depends on where is your biggest problem, right? If a company already has a good understanding of the IT landscape because they had a CIO who started to document things because for his budget planning he needed it, great, right? You don't need to maybe do a lot there, but maybe they have a problem on the process side, so they would start there. Other companies, it's different. You had a lot of process engineers or whatever. So like, I don't think it's relevant or it's important to start at the right place. It's important to start where the need is the biggest and where the impact is for you the biggest. I do think, though, it's important to keep all dimensions kind of in scope and like in sync, right? So it doesn't help if you then become world-class in processes, but your data is at the third level, right? And it's like you need to keep it in sync, right? And they all need to play together. I think that's more important than finding out where to start.
Of course, we have to bring into the conversation the two most important letters that are dominating any discussion about that, which are AI. To start that, you're also in an age like me who has experienced the .com bubble back then. And many people say like, probably we are at the moment in a similar phase or in a similar, let's say, development like the .com bubble back then, with the huge question marks, euphoria, hysteria in the beginning. Then there is this kind of a slump. And then in the second phase, the serious business capabilities, the business models come around. Do you think we are experiencing something similar with now, let's say, many AI companies having stock exchange troubles at the moment and probably realizing that, okay, there are several more steps to do? Do you think like we are in a similar kind of development?
So I honestly think, Alex, what we are seeing these days is unprecedented, to be quite frank. I don't think it's comparable to on-prem to cloud, SaaS, or the .com, even not the internet. I strongly believe, and I have invested quite significant time over the last 3 months, because we haven't talked about it, but I have decided to move on from SAP and have resigned. I'm currently looking into the market with a bit of a different lens, because for me now, I'm looking into the market of what is the impact of AI and who will be the net winners and kind of the net losers. Because for me, my next career step, this is a very relevant decision to make. And like you said it, I'm turning 50.
You want to make the right choice, definitely.
I want to make the right choice, because I'm turning 50 this year. So I might have another 10, 15 years or so. So the next gig needs to be right. So I'm actually literally today, started my AI curriculum, where I am hands-on for 3 months now, 4 hours a day, really doing AI stuff, right? Kind of creating my own agents, my own automations, like everything, like from the basics to the advanced. So what I've seen over the last 2-3 months, also in talking to a lot of market players, VCs, private equity funds, a lot of AI companies itself. Like, I don't think we have ever seen something like this, to be quite honest. Yes, of course, you will still have these waves, 100%. And then we have already seen a few, right? I mean, half a year ago, everybody was super excited, and then they did all the POCs, and there was hardly anybody successful with it, right?
Yeah.
And there are many, many reasons for that, and we probably touched upon a few of them already, with not having the right foundations and just putting things on top won't just work. But I really think that AI will have a fundamental impact on how work is being done over the next probably 3 to 5 years already, probably even quicker, depending on who you listen to. And honestly, I mean, for a lot of topics that we talked about, AI already helps a lot with it today. If I think about creating a process repository, right, or finding your right architectural guideline or so, like this is all you can create that much faster than in the past. But that's still like doing things in the old world, like we had it in the past. I do believe that once companies have come to a point where they have fixed their data and they know like where their data is, how their processes work, that the true impact of AI will start to get visible, and you're going to see a lot of more successful cases, a lot of more adoption, and a lot of more value being created with AI. So I see a significant shift happening in that space for sure.
When you say you're doing our curriculum, how did you approach that personal journey of building yourself a curriculum? What are the steps?
So I mean, the reason is that despite being at SAP and obviously being exposed to significant AI stuff, I still felt I'm behind. Like when I read, when I look at LinkedIn, when you look at other sources, it feels like, or it doesn't feel like, it is changing so fast. And I obviously wanted to make sure that I have a neutral kind of perspective on this, because obviously within SAP, you do believe that ERP is important and ERP will stay. But I really need to understand like what's going on. And so I felt I need to get my hands dirty myself and do it to really be able to better understand and better evaluate it. And of course, what I did is I used AI to create that curriculum. So I explained to Claude and ChatGPT, I did too. I explained my situation. I said what I want to achieve. I told it what I know and what I don't know, and what the output, what I want to get out of it, what my time invest and my money invest is. And like I did a few larger prompts and it went a little back and forth. But now I have I think a 120-page curriculum that I will go through day by day, and then we'll learn a lot, and we'll make it a great experience that hopefully then helps me to assess the world differently. And I maybe can let you know next time we talk how it went and what the outcome was of that.
Absolutely. And if I may re-ask there, are you in these kind of resources that are available? Because we of course we get flooded with these kinds of proposals like free online course here, free that, and so on. And I fully agree with you that probably our industry should make their hands much more dirty, especially in that area, than they at the moment should. They still talk too much about that instead of doing it. Which kind of resources do you funnel? Are these like really university Stanford courses, or do you say like, hey, there's so much more free available, which is so brilliant? What are your sources?
It's not an organized course in a way. It's like a freestyle curriculum created by Claude and ChatGPT that both kind of went back based on my prompt and came back with the proposal on how such a curriculum should be, what the content is, what the resources are, what tools I should use, like what money, how much money I need, right? So I'm actually spending, I think it's 600 euros a month now on this for access to, because you need the paid version of many of the tools, right? So it's not like you can do this completely for free, but I'm sure it's worth the money. But in the end, it's a freestyle curriculum that was created by AI, so that I get kind of the most tailored version, if you will, for my situation, because I don't necessarily need to know everything about the technological connectivity of this and that, right? So for me, it's more so like what would a CEO of a SaaS company need to know about AI so that he or she can judge best what direction to take the company, at that level. But in the end, it means that I need to understand what agents really do today, what they can do. And that means I need to do it myself to really assess it in a certain way. But I probably don't need an executive program from Stanford or something for that. I do believe that there is enough available out there. And again, AI, if you look at the quadrants where they assess what AI can replace easily and what it can't replace easily, learning and enablement is one of the things that AI can perfectly easily replace. So I felt, why should I now go somewhere and learn something if AI is able to do it for me? That's the first test, if you will, how great AI is for me. And actually, the output was pretty impressive, I must say. So the document is pretty impressive. And again, it starts today. So I had a week of vacation last week. We talked about my golf trip earlier, and now starts the real work for me. And I'm looking very much forward to that. It will be an interesting experience.
I absolutely agree, and I'm really also looking forward to learn from your experience in that area, because of course 600 euros per month. That's of course money, but I think everybody of us has paid in the past more for worse. So
100%.
why not do it? Exactly, and I think especially in our age, we should spend more on our education that we probably do, and especially in such a singularity event like we have now, this is definitely not the best or not the worst idea to do that. But still, although I completely agree with you that we probably do not know how things are evolving, do you have in your mind certain scenarios where you think like the journey can go in that area? Is this the death of SaaS, of ERP systems, of everything? Or is this an enablement? This is a multiplier for the things that we are doing?
I first and foremost think it's a function of time. I do think that in, 10, 15, 20 years, the world will look dramatically different than what we know today. Like in all aspects, not only for SaaS, but like how society works, how labor is being deployed. Like I think the change that we're going to see in the next 10, 15, 20 years is factor 100 to what we saw in the last 15, 20 years, right? I think it's more comparable to pre-steam machine or whatever, like really like industrial revolution times, like compared to today. Like I think the velocity is gonna be completely different. That makes it so hard to tell also what it then means for individual industries like SaaS or others for the next 5 to 10 years, right? Because the velocity on how AI is changing is so fast. I mean, now that AI is improving AI, like you get into this exponential improvement curve, right? Because like the limitation is in the end is compute and energy, right? So like, and other than that, it's AI improving AI, right? So you hardly need human interaction anymore, and that makes it a little scary, I must say, because like, how do you control it? How do you? I mean, once they are at the singularity level, what comes next, right? What's, and so I think back to your question, which is more focused on the software world. I do think there is a longer transition period than maybe people think, because just because the technology can do it doesn't mean that companies will easily adopt it. Back to the point of what's your fundament, right? Do you have things under control? Just because you could do agents doesn't mean you have the data quality that the agents can be trained on your company data, that you have the data availability across your silos, that the agents can be trained to run across the different functions that you have. And like there are many, many limiting factors within the companies. And that's why I do think you will have different vectors along which at different time speed, the change will happen, right? One vector for sure is the size of the company. I do believe that for the sweet spot for AI is mid-sized companies. It's not small moms and pop shops. They don't have the technological capability, but it's also not the Nestles or the Exxons of the world, because they are facing like huge complexity, and they also have different requirements when it comes to audit, traceability, things you go to jail for, right? And that's actually the other vector that is like, what will AI eat into? AI will eat first into things where you don't go to jail for, because that is protected. Things that are not core to production things, like I have a hard time believing that BMW will change their production ERP, logistics, supply chain to an AI startup agent in the next 5 to 10 years, right? Because like if that doesn't work, they won't produce a car anymore. Like the impact is like life endangering for the company. So for me, there are different vectors that will play into this. But yes, the longer term vector, like 10, 15, 20 years, I think nobody can imagine what is changing on that timeline. And so I would not dare to speculate what happens to ERP or to SaaS or whatsoever. I do think that, when I think about core SAP, I do think that this is because it serves mainly large companies, it serves mainly business critical, mission critical things, or where the CFO goes to jail if the AI makes 95% correct bookings, that's not good enough for a P&L, right? So there are things that will prevent or at least delay that in certain aspects. And of course, SAP itself will provide a lot of AI capabilities. And then the question is, do you really rip out your ERP system for something native AI compared to offering AI on top of their data semantics? And with BDC, you get everything. So this will all be movements that need to be observed. It's a super interesting and exciting and at parts scary phase of the world, because honestly, I have 3 kids. I have 3 boys, 22, 18, and 12. Like, what do I recommend them to study? We talk about this. The one studies political science. The other one just does high school closing or college closing. And so it's like, what is it that they should be doing? Like, I feel like society itself is not ready for the significant changes that are happening and for the velocity of change. And so are companies. So you see it all over the place. And so it's a super interesting phase to observe. And that's why I'm personally also pretty excited about my situation now of being kind of out there in the market and being able to observe and then kind of decide myself in which direction I'm personally heading. That's a super, super exciting moment for me.
But with that, we come back to the point that we discussed earlier, the transformation muscle. Yeah, because that in the end is the one thing that we actually can influence and that can prepare us for anything. And the same way, like you train your transformation muscle by going now into your personal curriculum, I think the same is there for organizations that they have to do. Yeah, because will an organization that spent the last 10 years for analyzes, stopping again, analyzes, and so on to determine the next architectural step. Will an organization like that be the one who suddenly flourishes with AI? I probably do not think so. But it will be those who are focusing on the relevant topics, who know what's at stakes and what kind of best practices they have to employ to move forward.
Yeah, I think there will be a huge AI pressure over the next 1 to 2 years on any organization, like the adoption pressure on a CIO or even a CEO from the board, right? To say, so where is the efficiency? Where is the automation? Where are the agents? Where are your layoffs in the end, right? Where is your P&L impact of all of this? That will become big. And I do think there will be certain industries where now certain AI native new players, new entrants that build the business model in this industry around AI capabilities, they will emerge, and they will emerge more and more. You see it already in marketing agencies and things like that, where and they will crush prices, right? They will go out very aggressively into the market, and then companies will say, "Oh, why should I buy the other?" Right? And then imagine what happens to the legacy company that does not use AI yet in that way. They will get price pressure, but they can't compete anymore. And the boards of these companies, they have the task to see this and then put pressure on the board to not let this happen. So you will see significant pressure on that, and that will lead to companies then trying to do it on top, they will fail. And then the CIOs will say, okay, but then we need to fix the underlying fundament, right? And that's where then the requirement for the transformation capability comes in. And that's where I also said earlier, you have AI today, so you don't need to start from scratch on creating your process landscape and your models and everything. You can use AI for a lot of that, and like you can jumpstart there as well, right? So and Signavio is doing that, and LeanIX is doing that, and they have great capabilities in all of that. So like I do think there is a shortcut there, but in the end, you still will have to make sure that you build AI on top of it and on top of a solid fundament. And I just recently also read an article about that the true winners of AI are the people, and I would call them the transformation agents, like the people who know the processes, who know the systems, who know the data of the company, because they will be the ones who will train the agents, who will tell the agents what to do, who will be the orchestrators kind of in the middle, who will supervise the agents, who might even take out agents or create new agents or combine agents. Like these are the people who know the business, like the ones who operate operations or sales or finance, and then who are the middleman, if you will. And I think that there was some truth to that. So I think that being at that transformation front is something that is very attractive these days, because that won't go away. Like yes, it will become easier to do the job with AI, but like the role itself and being the one who is able to understand the company operating model, that's a true asset also in the age of AI.
Absolutely. And also, like so many companies who are at the moment talking about using AI to raise efficiency, which is fine, of course. Yeah. But still the masterclass will be in going into the effectiveness area to actually be able to do new things and to disrupt. And this is a different game in that, of course. That
100%. But that's the typical, like you said before, like the evolution that we're going to see. Like the first use cases will be, I do the same, but I do it more efficiently. I do it more automated. I need less labor for it. But then obviously comes the more inspirational phase, which is now I can do even other things I haven't done before, because there were limitations before that now I can overcome with AI. And if I combine these three things, I can offer something completely new. And that will be obviously then also where it's about creating additional revenues for companies as opposed to just optimizing the bottom line. So that will be, I mean, we already see it today happening, but like the focus today is still on the efficiency part, while we haven't yet seen a huge efficiency impact across the world, right? So like there are a few cases, but not like that many. And therefore, I think we're going to see quite a bit of more efficiency plays. But then over time, the focus will, because efficiency plays will become more commodity at some point, and then people will turn more to the value creation plays, how I would call it.
Awesome. With closing this podcast episode, which was absolutely stunning, are there any things, Rouven, that you said like, okay, that's what we not have talked yet about, but I think this is extremely relevant for our times?
No, I think it was a good run through, like how should I say, the ingredients for successful companies. And I think, these days companies can only be successful if they are able to adapt, if they are able to be agile and react. And like every company that is not able to do this, given the velocity that change is happening out there, they will die, right? Like sooner or later. And I think AI is the ultimate, how should I say, catalyst for that in the end, right? Because the velocity with AI will just increase x-fold, and therefore I think but the funny thing is that still the old school things around processes, around your architecture, around your data, like that old school things, I think they still are extremely relevant. Because if you don't have that under control, it will be very hard for you to get a meaningful like AI impact. And so for me, it feels like what I have done over the last years, especially the last 5 years, was very meaningful, because we saw that, obviously we saw AI coming, but like we saw the requirement for that agility piece and making transformation a capability as opposed to a project. And that now plays also into that AI play. And that's where I feel like that's super exciting, because we were working towards that for over the last years. And now seeing how relevant it has become is really super exciting, even though I'm moving on and I'm taking a different path now, which is also very, very exciting, as I said earlier, for me personally, because I feel like we are at an inflection point, not only on the economy side, but also like society-wise, and being at the forefront of that and being able to experience that will be pretty exciting.
Perfect. Rouven, I hope you are warmed up now for jumping into your curriculum.
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to talk with you again in a few months, learning about your experiences that you made and the time in between. Thank you very much. The famous last question is always, if people want to get in contact with you, how can they do it best?
The best way probably is LinkedIn. So we haven't talked about it. I also have a little startup already running, which is a golf indoor facility, which has 5 TrackMan bays. So if you're interested, and maybe we can link it as well. You can also get in touch there with me. It's called For You, but the 4 is the golf 4, so FORE. U.golf. So that's why I'm actually applying now the AI things that I'm learning. I'm using my little golf startup to run marketing campaigns, to create Instagram things, to create agents for that. So I'm using a real life example for that. That also is a good way to stay in touch, but LinkedIn obviously also works.
Perfect. Awesome. Rouven, have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Take care. Bye-bye.